Blessed love, brothers and sisters. It's not a Shabbat lesson, it's an impromptu video. I'm going to title it Caribbean Black People Influence Black American Lingua. Right, brothers and sisters. So, the civil rights movement was a non-violent social movement and campaign from 1954 to 1968 in the United States to abolish legalized racial segregation, discrimination, and disenfranchisement throughout the United States. Marcus Garvey influence. When Marcus Garvey died in 1940, the role of the British Empire was already being challenged by India and the rising expectation of the African colonies. Marcus Garvey's advocacy of African redemption and the restoration of African state sovereign political entity in the world affairs was still a dream without fulfillment. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941, the United States would enter in a formal way what had been up to that day strictly a European conflict. Marcus Garvey's prophecy about the European scramble to maintain dominance over the whole world was now a reality. The people of Africa and Asia had joined in this conflict, but with different hopes, different dreams, and many misgivings. Africans throughout the colonial world, right? Africans throughout the colonial world were mounting campaigns against this system which had robbed them of their nationness and their basic humanness. Discovery of the reconsideration of the teachings of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey were being rediscovered and reconsidered by a large number of African people as this world conflict deepened. In 1945, when World War II was drawing to a close, the Fifth Pan-African Congress was called in Manchester, England. Some of the confrontationers were George Padmore, Kwame Nkrumah, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria and Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya. Up to this time, the previous Pan-African Congresses had mainly called for improvements in the educational status of the Africans in the colonies, right? So that they would be prepared for self-rule when independence eventually came. The Pan-African Congress in Manchester was radically different from all the other congresses. For the first time, Africans from Africa, Africans from the Caribbean, and the Africans from the United States had come together and designed a program for the future independence of Africa, brothers and sisters. And so, brothers and sisters, so see, the whole purpose of Marcus Garvey movement is wraparound reparation, as you can see, brothers and sisters. You know what I mean? His whole directive is to go back to our land, where we came from, when we were taken from West Coast Africa. You understand, brothers and sisters? So, and that was in the 1900s. You know what I mean? Other brothers started that trend in 1800s, 1830s, 1840s, 50s, so forth, right, brothers and sisters? And then Marcus Garvey in 1900 revamped that to be a national thing, right? And so, brothers and sisters, the video preceding this little brief history of the contribution to the Black American culture by Caribbeans, right? The video I'm going to title is Caribbean Black People Influence Black American Lingua. Caribbean Black People Influence Black American Lingua. And when you see this video, you're gonna see what I'm talking about, brothers and sisters. I'm gonna post a link of the full video below this video. Alright, brothers and sisters, so the Ashanti and Gadagami, right? The Ashanti and Gadagami. Woven through the culture and history of the Ashanti tribe and other tribes of Ghana, West Africa, is very strong, conclusive evidence that they are direct descendants of the Hebrew Israelites that migrated to West Africa by way of Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Lake Chad. Right, brothers and sisters? Their culture, practices, laws, and customs are so identical to those described in the Bible. The only logical conclusion to make is that they are, as they claim themselves, descendants of the biblical Hebrew Israelites. From a book on Ashanti history written by an Ashanti historian named Ozzy Kwadwo. Right? Ozzy Kwadwo. This truth is verified. Research by historians like Dr. J.B. Dankwa reveals that the Asante nation was among the group called the Akans. These Akan people migrated from the old Ghana Empire to present Ghana. Some oral traditions go even further to state that the Akans migrated from Mesopotamia to Africa. They continue to state that the Akans either share the same boundaries with the Israelites or were the same stock as the Israelites before they migrated to Africa. Right? Page 1. An outline of Asante history by Osie Kwadwo. Right? Osie Kwadwo. Even the name Ashanti is connected to one of the families of the Hebrew Israelite tribe of Yehuda or Sahuda. And the uttermost cities of the children of Judah were Libnah and Ether and Ashan. Joshua 15:42, 1611 KJV. According to the Dagme oral tradition, they migrated from Israel. They believe they are descendants of the Dagmes, claim to be descendants of Dan and Gad, the fifth and seventh son of Yaakov. Biblical history suggests that Yaakov, whom Elohim named Israel, had Leah as his wife, who gave birth to 4 sons for him. When Leah noticed that she had passed childbearing age, she gave her maidservant Zilpah to wife. Through Zilpah, Jacob had Dan and Gad and 4 more sons. Jacob has 2 sons with Rachel. Gad's 5th son was Eri, who later formed a clan known as Iritis. Genesis 30:9, Genesis 46:16, Numbers 26:15-19, and Deuteronomy 3:12, Genesis 30:4, 8, 3:12. Please write these scriptures down and go read them for yourself, brothers and sisters, right? Descendants of Eri, son of Gad, are believed to have founded the Neri kingdom around 900 AD of the southeastern and parts of the midwestern Igbo land in Nigeria, with other tribes of Levi, Zebulun, Ephraim, and possibly more. In the book of Numbers, the Bible had made extensive reference to the children of Israel, which includes Gad and Dan and their children. Numbers 1:1-54. Biblical history strongly lends support to the claim by Gadagmes that they are Hebrew Israelites due to the fact Gadagme names are found throughout the Old Testament. Examples are Nicolila, Revelation 2:6-15, Amasa, 2 Samuel 17:25:1, Chronicles 33:20-21, Jani, 2 Timothy 3:8, Ammon, 2 Chronicles 33:20-21, Ashali or Asala Hill, 1 Chronicles 2:16, 2 Samuel 2:18-19. King Ayakushi, spell Cush in Hebrew, Genesis 10:6, Jeremiah 13:23, Isaiah 18:12, led the Dagmes from Cush to Ethiopia to Ayawaso and was the founder of the Ga dynasty. It is believed that the Ga Dagmes kingdom, the Ayawaso, was the first kingdom in Ghana. It is interesting that Queen Dodi Akabi, named Dodi, is a Hebrew name, also the name of the hunter Kadi, who found a group of people as Osuduku and introduced them to the Nongua Mansi, is a Hebrew name. The Nongua Mansi or Mansi In consolation with Gamashi, Mansi gave Usu lands to the Kadi Giboi, as people of Usu were referred to. Gagdagni's custom of circumcision of their male born and their patriarch tradition further lend support to the Hebrew Israelites' origin. Genesis 17:1 to 12. The Homo Festival, the Passover, right? The Homo Festival, the Passover, celebrated by the Gagdagnis, supports their claim that they are Hebrew Israelite descendants of children of Jacob. Exodus 13:1 to 10, Exodus 12-1 to 50, Numbers 9:1 to 5. According to the Abbé in his book Kidzi Afo Jordan 1968, Gagdagnis tradition, during which they put money in the coffin of their deceased relative prior to burial, is an ancient Hebrew Israelite custom in ancient Jordan. Coins placed in the coffins of the deceased, believing that their spirit will use it in paying for their passage across the river Jordan. The Abiyan cloth belonging to the deceased, which is torn to pieces, and each piece is placed on the left wrist of deceased relatives and very close friends, is an ancient Jewish custom. Also, the Dipo or Otfo custom of the Gadagnis are said to be ancient Hebrew Israelite customs. These are ancient tradition customs still observed by Gadagnis, clearly lend credence to their claim that they are Hebrew Israelite origin. Here are some Gadagnis names and their Hebrew equivalent. Gadagnis names, Hebrew names: Aria, Afra, Afora, Otto, Ishal, Arieli, Ofi, Ophir, Ada, Tima, Nunu, Dodo, Anan, Gyad, Abe, Abraham, Saka, Dodi, Kadi, Nerli, Aya, right, that's a female name, Aya, male, two different, Aya, male is spelled Ayah, that's for the male, and for the female is Ayah. Adam, Neti Nathaniel, right? Achimot, Non, Ama, Amel, Abeke, Afike, right? Omanye, Omen, Akuf, Ayilet, Shormi, Nati, Naten, Taga, Gamal, Achi, Ashi, Sabra, Adon, Gali, Ga, Adi, Adel, Ama, Amel, Ariel. Right, brothers and sisters? This is confirmed by Charles Ama in his book Ga Homo, in which he states that it is traditionally stated that the Ga people were really Jews who immigrated from Egypt and settled on the land they now occupy. Ado Kuvi Mufat, the Igbo and the Bene Ephraim Yoruba of Nigeria. Nigeria, there are two tribes who claim that their origin is from East Africa, Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, and that many generations ago they migrated from this area and settled on the west coast of Africa. The Igbos were called the Jews of West Africa because they practiced many of the same laws that Elohim Yah gave to his people Israel. The native law and the Mosaic system is remarkably similar, right, to any contemplating resident in the Igbo country. I would recommend a careful study of the Levitical law. In many ways, the affinity between native law and the Mosaic legal system is remarkable. Inside Africa, the Igbo state that the name Igbo is a form of the name Hebrew. The Yoruba has a part of their population, black Jews, whom they call Imo, Jo Kwaim, or strange people. However, these Jews call themselves B'nai Ephraim, son of Ephraim. Their ancestors migrated from East Africa to Morocco and then south to present-day Nigeria. The sacrificial system and other laws given by Elohim Yah to the Hebrew Israelites are observed by the B'nai Ephraim. Many of the Africans captured and taken from West Africa in slave ships were Hebrew Israelites. Many of the Africans captured and taken from West Africa in slave ships were Hebrew Israelites. Many of the Africans captured and taken from West Africa in slaves were Hebrew Israelite descendants of the above mentioned tribes. The last phase of the scattering dispersion of the Hebrew Israelite tribes was the transatlantic slave trade and the inhuman enslavement of the American and Western Hemisphere. And Yahuwah shall scatter, disperse you among all people from one end of the earth to the other, and Yahuwah shall bring you into Egypt bondage slavery again with ships by the way wherefore I spoke unto you, and you shall see no more again. And there in the land of your captivity you shall be sold for bondmen, male slaves, and bondwomen, female slave, and no man shall buy you. Right? That's Deuteronomy 28, 64 to 68. However, at the end of the age and the end of the Gentile European world domination, Yah promised he would begin to send his Holy Spirit, Ruach HaKodesh, to rise a remnant of his people, Israel, the African Hebrew Israelites, from the four corners of the earth and from all the places he has scattered them. This is what we are now beginning to see in Africa and in America. And it shall come to pass in that day that Yahuwah shall send his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left remain from Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Patros, upper Egypt near Sudan, and from Cush, Ethiopia, and from Elam, Aran, India, and from Shinar, Iraq, and from Hamad, and from the isles of the sea, San Thome, Cape Verde, Jamaica, Virgin Island, etc. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations. Right? Rastafari means name manifest. Right? Ras means Etafari means one to be feared. Right? So we know who's one to be feared, the creator of heaven and earth, hence name manifest. Right? And shall assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather them to disperse scattered of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Isaiah 11:11 to 12, brothers and sisters. Right? Here's an image on your screen of Queen Naida Achan, Hebrew Israelite, Nazarite Empress of the tribe of Yehuda. Right? Isaiah 44:6-8, Isaiah 49. Also, she has sibling to Kojo. Right? Fierce warriors. You understand, brothers and sisters? And again, we all know that when the scripture says Judah is not just talking about Judah, it's also talking about Benjamin also, because Benjamin was the last one. Right, brothers and sisters? Like a little brother. So wherever Judah is, Benjamin is always there. So Benjamin was always looking out for, Judah was always looking out for Benjamin. So wherever Judah is, Benjamin is always there. You understand, brothers and sisters? So now, got to get that brief history. Right? So let's watch this video together, brothers and sisters. Blessed love and shalom.
My father, who's an entertainer, wrote a song called Word Up. And it was about the language. It was about someone saying word up, right? That was the language of our street.
When I talk to people and I ask them about that, ask them about what blackness is, what black language is to them, what does sounding black mean to them, more often than not, it's about a sound and a rhythm, this sort of movement and fluidity. It's sort of imbued with this cultural richness.
Language is music. They say picture is worth 1,000 words, but I feel like I grew up in an environment where a person could use a few words and it felt like 1,000 pictures.
I'm afraid it's one of the great dilemmas, one of the great psychological hazards of being an American Negro. One's born in a white country, where one was once a slave, where all the standards, none of it applies to you. So obviously I hadn't always talked the way I had forced myself to learn how to talk. I realized it was a cadence, it was a beat. It was not a question of dropping S's or N's or G's, but a question of the beat, really. It's that tone and that sound, you know, which is in me.
What defines talking black? That's the real question to me, because talking black to me is an insult when you say you're talking black or you're talking white. Because I choose to pronounce my words. I'm not talking black. I'm totally black. I'm black.
Yeah.
So every word that comes out of my mouth is me talking.
Yeah, but
so I'm talking black.
But you're not talking black because you don't sound black while you're talking.
And that's my point. And I'm offended by that. What do you mean I don't sound black? I'm black, so I sound just as black as you do.
While I think anybody who's African American, you speak African American language because it's about you, the person, being African American, what you use. At the same time, I'm sort of pushed on that notion when I hear people or know that people exist who don't really seem to sound in a particular way.
I'm told all the time if somebody answers the phone, "Oh, I thought you were a white boy." What was that supposed to mean? I'm speaking the way that my family spoke. But did I know the language? Do I know another language? Yeah, I know another language.
It's just like anything else. As surely as a kid learns how to use words, they learn how to use them in the ways that they're being used.
What is it you know when you know African American English, when you know it as a system, when you use it as your native language? Speakers of African American English, from my particular viewpoint, are those speakers who grow up in African American English speaking communities.
Many people assume that black English is one thing. All black people speak it pretty much the same way. There are many types of black English here in the United States.
Certainly there are differences that are regional differences, but I think there's some core aspect, and I think that's shared by many speakers of African American English. But as a speaker who grew up in Southwest Louisiana, I do things with African American English that I might not expect my counterparts who grew up in some other areas to do.
If I walk up to him, I say, "What's up?" I'm speaking. I'm saying, "Hey, how you doing?" I ran into some guys from New York up there in the middle of here, and we're in a big Burger King getting something to eat. I'm standing in the line. They stand beside me. I'm like, "What's up?" And he just turned to me like, "What's up?" You know, to them, "What's up?" means, I'm like, no, I was speaking. I'm from Mississippi.
I'm in between Cali, St. Louis, Chicago, Detroit, Philly, New York. You'll get a different greeting, and that's just the start. I can go down to Atlanta and say, what it do? Detroit, what up, though? New York, what's up, sir? Cali, what up, blood? You better be careful where you at if you say blood, though. But they know if you say what's up, blood, it's family.
Well, I'm from a place where we don't use the dialect that I use here, but I'm able to maneuver with it. So you might hear, "What up, shorty? What up, though?" And I'll just give them something that I had from Detroit. It'd be like, "What up, shorty?" I'd be like, "What up, though?" Or if you go to New Orleans, say, "Hey, Wody." The language gives you access and it'll give you a barrier. So the best thing to do is use it for your access.
I am from an African American background, but I went to a predominantly white school. And even when I was younger, my black family members would make fun of me and call me white girl. White girl, you talk like a white girl, you talk like a white girl, because they lived in a more urban area and I lived in the suburbs. So all my life it's kind of been this, I talk like this with this group of people, and then I talk like this with this group of people.
I think a lot of people are surprised at how much individual speakers can actually shift. I use sort of mainstream ways of talking so much in my professional life that a lot of people doubt that I actually speak any other way. But when I'm outside that professional setting, it really is sort of my language of comfort. It's my language of home. It's my language of family. It's my language of friendship. I think you can look at middle class speakers and assume that they don't speak African American vernacular English because all I'm hearing is standard English. But what happens is that a lot of middle class speakers do what I like to call code switching. I consider myself to be a code switcher, but I don't spend a lot of time thinking now I will use the vernacular. So this is a girlfriend that I'm talking to.
Because let me tell you, that daycare tuition ain't no joke. It ain't no joke. Yeah. But I only got a few more months, girl, and we'll be out. A few more months. This is it for us, girl.
And so the last one is me with my mom.
Where you from? I was like, Columbia. What part of Columbia you don't know about Hags? It's like the suburbs. And he thought that was just so funny. But I'm like, I don't know nothing about no doggone Hags.
With any kind of code switching, I think it happens below the level of conscious awareness.
When I'm talking to my sisters, it's very casual, it's very comfortable. But when I'm talking to, other people, or when I'm talking to professors, it's like, for them, it's like I'm a different person. And it makes you self-conscious, and it makes you feel, for me, as though I was not necessarily being true to myself or being black. But then you come to find that it's okay to kind of meet people where they are.
It's so interesting, this issue of identity, language, acceptance, and inclusion or exclusion. I want to be included, so I will use a certain type of language. Who wants to be excluded?
You have this kind of complex push in which, on the one hand, the language is vibrant, it's fulfilling, it's expressive, it's enjoyable, and on the other hand, you have African Americans dealing with the larger society, getting pushback, getting misunderstanding.
Unless you have your own company, or you're a rapper, or you're an athlete with vernacular, you are going to be pushed out of opportunities and marginalized. For survival, economic survival, I'm going to have to do that song and dance.
African American English has a place, but for the most part, it's always relegated to entertainment. In rap music, R&B, things like that, but it's not okay outside of those realms.
The game only changes if you can commodify certain aspects of culture in disadvantaged communities. But the game doesn't really change when it comes to the different things that we see as professional and managerial. They're changing in the sense that they're allowing more of us in who were historically excluded. But in order to be in, we have to read the cultural codes of that space.
I enjoy the nuances of how they speak and how I speak, and I'm not changing me, but I'm also grown. I do tell them, and I'm very transparent and honest about the fact that you live in a world where you do need to translate, and you do need to code switch, and you do need to speak King's English, and you do need to make sure that you're able to navigate the systems, right? Because there is privilege, and that does exist.
It was always very contentious about what we should do with student language. They need to have standard English in order to be successful in school the way it's set up right now. But there was a lot of times a real negative, people talked about student language in a really negative way. That came not just from white teachers, but that came from African American teachers. It came from parents. It came from societal messages.
Me telling you what you just said is said incorrectly is like telling you that your mama is not smart. What I just said, my mom said to me. That's where I got it from. Or my dad, or my people, or whatever. If I said, that's not how smart people talk, because that's what teachers say, right? That's not the correct way to say that. Then what you're not saying is that everybody in my life doesn't speak correctly, right? What you're not saying is that everybody other than you, right, is wrong, which can't be right.
People have the impression that African American English is nothing more than a collection of errors because that's how they've been socialized. If it's not standard English, it's wrong. So we have this framework that all of us have been indoctrinated into. There's a right and a wrong in language. Language itself is always right because there's always a systematicity, a patterning to it.
All stigmatized languages usually have this false reputation of having no structure or having no grammar.
What does standard English accomplish that these so-called versions of substandard English don't accomplish in terms of communication? Nothing. You know what I mean? Nothing at all. Anything that seems to stand in the way, you say, oh, it'll help you get a job. Well, is that because of the language? It's not that you're unable to communicate, or is that because of all these various isms that stand in the way of you being able to take care of yourself?
That's the one thing that people don't understand the most. This is not random. People are not making mistakes. People are not confused about a rule. They are governed by a different set of rules.
In African American language, you can say things like, he happy, or John tall, or he the man. You might say, well, okay, folks are just leaving out is or are. But they're not just leaving it out. In language, nothing is ever just like random. You can just leave it out or put it in. No, there's a very, very strict set of rules. Like, there's some places where you can't leave it out.
You will hear speakers say quite often, he nice, he running. But you wouldn't hear those speakers say, I nice, I running. And you can see these patterns emerging as children are developing African American English. So people don't wake up at 15 and just start speaking African American English. This is a system that's really in place early on, and children are working it out as they become older.
Let me give you a different example that people talk about a lot. You can say, John be studying Saturday nights, okay? Now, a lot of people think that be is just like is in English. I could look at somebody sitting in front of me and I could say, John's sitting down right now. But I can't say, John, be sitting down right now. Be always means that something happens habitually, frequently, and so on.
It's a whole bunch of people in New York that we know. The way they be talking and stuff. The way they be talking and stuff.
You acquire it as part of the normal human facility of acquiring a language.
A lot of times people assume that there is some linguistic basis for, the stigma against a variety. And they're not aware that it really is about the people.
The issue, Mr. Chairman, has received a lot of attention all over the United States. And I simply want to say that I think Ebonics is absurd.
In the mid-90s, 1995, 1996, there was a big Ebonics controversy. The Oakland School Board was trying to get what had been fairly solidly established linguistic research into schools.
Many linguists have stated that Oakland's decision is credible, it is rational, and a potentially effective way to improve the academic standard of its students.
And the public really misunderstood the message of what was happening and reacted in ways that kind of set back what educators were trying to do with language.
That's just bad English, isn't it? How could you say that's a language?
No, that's different English.
No,
that's
it's
not
bad
no, That's
English.
not. But that's your opinion that it's bad. No, it's not
A lot of teachers just kind of take what they've heard, sort of the predominant social narratives, and they just sort of, reproduce them. When we start being more critical of those and teachers start thinking about it more closely, then we've got a lot more opportunities to help kids.
I'm really actually quite tickled when I move into classroom spaces and I see how facile kids are with language, even if they're not, adept as we measure it on a test with standard English. But they are so adroit at moving back and forth and talking to one another and volleying. And we don't know how to, fold that kind of energy, that kind of skill into the test that we're using to evaluate them, that then has some serious consequences for their mobility in American society.
Because language and identity are so closely tied, if we value more language, then we also value more student ways of being within schools.
This country, if this person says he be going to work,
the average citizen who encountered the term of Ebonics
during the Oakland controversy did so at a time when late-night talk show hosts were, lampooning the term. And as a professional linguist, I was disheartened when I saw so many people mocking a term that referred to linguistic circumstances that I think should be better understood by the entire nation, but which have been the object of linguistic discrimination since the inception of slavery. Slave descendants have a unique linguistic heritage in comparison to every other immigrant group that came to this country. African slaves, when they were captured, were often isolated linguistically from others that spoke their own mother tongue while they were on the west coast of Africa. That linguistic isolation was also maintained on the ships during the Atlantic crossing. And as a result of that, not one indigenous African language has survived the Atlantic crossing intact. Once they got here, it was illegal to teach them to read and write. For hundreds of years, slaves were denied access to education. As a result of that, many of the linguistic stereotypes, many of the negative linguistic stereotypes that people embrace regarding African American English, dismissing it as, the language of someone who's being lazy or not attending to language, doesn't fully appreciate the linguistic isolation that slave descendants experienced is unlike any other immigrant group in this country.
When they were brought here, African Americans were segregated into plantations. That's what happened in the Caribbean also. And what they did was to invent new languages, new varieties, taking linguistic properties from the surrounding varieties and creating new forms. These are creations of people put in an absolutely horrible set of circumstances, and out of that milieu came new language forms.
We're standing on an island where we know 40% of all people of color that were taken and survived the Middle Passage, that arrived in North America, first step foot on North American soil right here on this island of Sullivan's Island. Any vessel coming into the New World, coming into the port of Charleston, were required to quarantine their cargo, African cargo, human cargo, here on this island for approximately 10 days. Then they would be taken into Charleston and to be sold as part of the African slave trade. And then now their labor, their talents, their gift, and their skills would now be diffused across the low country of South Carolina and Georgia, North Carolina, and Florida as well.
Margie, she was nice. She said, Laura, and like she come in the evening time, she have to come and get them kids. Them kids won't go, She'll be here, and this time so she here. Then she know if she don't go home, she's right here with me.
Gullah is an African-American language variety spoken along the coasts of South Carolina and Georgia. Gullah is a Creole variety. Linguists use that term to refer to languages that emerge in situations of contact between speakers who have no common language among them.
I done mess up things up here. Yeah, I done go and mess up. Because you know one thing, y'all is young, and y'all is saying things up here, and people ain't know why y'all saying them. They ain't know how come y'all say what y'all say, this, that, and ain't. Once upon a time, us had a language all over young. We had a language all over. I remember like yesterday. I remember like it was yesterday. When I first had to go to school. First went to school. You know what I done night before? The night before. I went down to the shipper room. To the dresser.
There's some controversy over where African-American English comes from, but one side of that debate, of course, is that it was once a Creole-like variety, a Gullah-like Creole.
When I grew up, all my grandmother, my mother, My father, my aunts, and everybody spoke the same language, so you didn't know a difference because you grew up in a community where everybody's speaking the same language. And my mother is 73 years old, and she speaks Gullah, and my sisters and brothers, all of us speak Gullah, but we don't realize we speak in Gullah. It's just a natural language to us.
You know, and a stranger come to your door, you say, what want to come here for? Why did you come here? And, oh, we glad for see una. We glad una come for see we.
I really recognized it when I left home and went to college. I realized that, oh, these people talk funny. And they realized with me too, I talk funny. But it's they call it broken language, but we say broken to who?
As we continue to educate the public about this culture, then the public would, the outside public would then accept it. And we would feel accepted.
We, Papa in heaven, let everybody honor your name because you're holy. We pray that soon you go and rule over we. What's the big thing you want? Let it be in this world same like it be there in heaven. Give we the food this day and every day. Forget the bad thing we to do, because we forget them that do bad to we.
We are the Gullah kinfolk all the way across the water. Because whether you know it or not, you is Gullah kinfolk. Because it's the blending of all of those cultures that came together during that transatlantic slave trade. So turn to your neighbor and say, cousin, oh cousin, this is a family reunion. A family reunion.
The rhythm of it is very much like Caribbean English Creoles. And so a lot of times, my husband, for example, is from Jamaica and now living in South Carolina, and we'll often hear a Gullah Geechee speaker and assume that they're from Jamaica or from the Caribbean.
People don't understand, but Jamaicans are the same. They come from Africa also, but it's just that they went to the Caribbean side of the area when we came for this, this side of the border, so we still speak the same kind of language, but we just have a different dialect.
African Americans are trying to say, who am I? Who am I? And so they're always looking back, right? They're looking to Africa. I say, before you get to Africa, you got to get to the Caribbean.